He hit him clean. No flag, no whistle, no late launch, no helmet-to-helmet by the standards of that era. Darryl Stingley went down the way receivers went down all the time in the 1970s, stretched out, stunned, the crowd already buzzing for the replay. Only this time, he didn't move. At first, nobody panicked. Players stood around. Some looked to the sideline. It felt like a routine injury pause, the kind that resets the huddle and moves on. But the seconds stretched. Then the minute. Then the stretcher. Jack Tatum stood nearby, watching, helmet still on, breathing hard. He had delivered that exact collision thousands of times. Same angle, same force, same intent. This was the first time it ended a man's life as he knew it. And here's the part we don't talk about enough. If you'd been watching football back then, you probably would have cheered. Because before that day, Jack Tatum wasn't controversial. He was the blueprint. The league didn't hide his hits. It sold them. Slow motion replays, crunching sound effects. Announcers dropped their voices like they were narrating something heroic. They gave his collisions names. Quarterbacks feared him. Receivers listened for his footsteps. Defensive coordinators pointed at him and said, That's what we want. Nobody called it reckless. They called it football. So when Stingley didn't get up, it wasn't just a player on the ground. It was the first crack you could actually see. Not because Tatum changed. He didn't. He kept playing the same way he always had. What changed was the lens. The same violence that made him famous would eventually make him one of the most controversial figures in NFL history. And the league that once celebrated those hits would spend decades trying to scrub its fingerprints off them. The uncomfortable question underneath all of it is this. Was Jack Tatum ahead of his time, or was he exactly what the league wanted, until the consequences became impossible to ignore? To answer that, you have to go back before the stretcher, before the silence, before the moment the applause started to sound different. Coming out of high school, Jack Tatum had zero interest in football. He didn't even start playing until his sophomore year at Passaic High School in New Jersey. He wasn't raised to become the assassin. But once he did, scouts didn't need long to see it. He wasn't learning the game, he was imposing himself on it. First team All-State, high school All-American. The kid who started late was suddenly unstoppable. Ohio State came calling, and head coach Woody Hayes had big plans. It wasn't just a new sport for him anymore. It started looking like a lane. Hayes recruited Tatum as a running back, convinced he'd be the next great Buckeye rusher. But assistant coach Lou Holtz saw something different. Holtz convinced Hayes to move Tatum to defensive back during his freshman season, and that decision changed everything. Not because he moved to defense, but because of what people felt when he was there. At Ohio State, Tatum became a weapon. He didn't just cover receivers, he erased them. In 1968, he shut down Purdue's All-American Leroy Keys, and it felt like a warning. A new kind of safety had arrived. You didn't just get covered, you got reminded. Receivers didn't just fail to catch passes, they started thinking twice about crossing his area at all. From 1968 to 1970, Tatum helped lead the Buckeyes to a 27-2 record. He was a unanimous All-American in 1969 and 1970, and he was named National Defensive Player of the Year in 1970. He wasn't just winning games, he was changing what the position felt like to play against. Ohio State loved him so much that decades later, in 2001, they created the Jack Tatum Hit of the Week award to honor the player who delivered the most impressive defensive blow of the game. Think about that. They didn't just remember his style, they kept rewarding it. They institutionalized violence, made brutality a trophy, and Tatum was the standard. When the Oakland Raiders selected Jack Tatum with the 19th overall pick in the 1971 NFL Draft, they weren't drafting a cover guy, they were drafting an enforcer. The Raiders of the 1970s were outlaws. They wore silver and black, and in Jack Tatum, they found the perfect avatar for their identity. He didn't have to fit in. This was the kind of team built for him. Tatum signed a 3-year contract with a $50,000 signing bonus, which is just shy of $400,000 today. He immediately became the starting free safety, but he wasn't alone. Tatum joined a unit that would become legendary, the Soul Patrol. one of the most feared defensive backfields the game had ever seen. Hall of Fame quarterback Fran Tarkington said it best. There was nothing like them. Atkinson and Tatum and the rest of the gang were so physical and so strong that I'd have to wait and hope my guys could get open before I got killed. And that's the part people forget. Even throwing the ball became a calculation. That hesitation was the real victory. Their philosophy was simple. If you make a receiver hear footsteps every time he runs over the middle, eventually he'll lose the concentration to catch the ball, and Tatum was the master of this art. He didn't have to win every snap. He just had to live in your head. He didn't need to hit every receiver. He only needed them to believe he would. All-time great Paul Warfield once said that when you went over the middle against Oakland and didn't account for Tatum and Atkinson, you would not be in the game long without being carried off the field. That's not trash talk. That's a veteran warning. Fear became part of the defensive scheme. On September 24, 1972, Tatum returned a fumble 104 yards for a touchdown against the Green Bay Packers. It stood as the NFL record for 28 years. But that's not what people remember, because what happened in December that same year became a talking point for years. That tells you everything. His biggest play wasn't even the one people led with, because impact, not statistics, defined his legacy. It's December 23, 1972. The Immaculate Reception is one of the most famous plays in NFL history, and Tatum was right in the middle of it. It was the AFC Divisional Playoff, and the Raiders were leading 7-6 with just 22 seconds remaining when Steelers quarterback Terry Bradshaw threw a desperation pass toward running back John "Frenchie" Fuqua. And Tatum, true to his style, closed in and delivered a massive hit as the ball arrived. The collision sent the ball ricocheting back through the air, and somehow Steelers running back Franco Harris caught it just before it hit the turf, then ran 42 yards for the game-winning touchdown that eliminated Oakland from the playoffs. The controversy centered on whether the ball touched Fuqua or Tatum first. The referees ruled it touched Tatum, which validated the touchdown and broke the hearts of Raider fans everywhere. Critics of Tatum's style point to this play as proof that his desire to punish outweighed his awareness. If he had simply knocked the ball down instead of trying to destroy Fuqua, the Raiders likely advance. That's the first crack in the legend. What if the violence cost more than it gained? It became a theme that followed him. The thin line between an effective defensive play and a catastrophic mistake driven by aggression. From 1973 to 1975, Tatum was voted to 3 straight Pro Bowls. He was one of the premier safeties in the entire NFL. But his reputation wasn't built on coverage or interceptions. It was built on violence. And at that time, violence didn't get you pushed out. It got you promoted. His peak came on January 9, 1977, in Super Bowl XI, Oakland versus Minnesota. During that game, Tatum delivered what many people still consider the most iconic hit in Super Bowl history, when he struck Vikings wide receiver Sammy White with such force that White's helmet launched downfield and tumbled through the air like a loose ball. It's still one of those clips people pull up like it explains the whole era. No penalty was called. At the time, it was viewed as a good, clean shot under the rules of that day. The hit was celebrated on highlight reels for decades as the ultimate expression of defensive dominance. Even though his coach, John Madden, later said players never actually called him that during games, Tatum didn't care. The nickname made him more marketable, more valuable as a brand. He didn't fight it, he wore it. He became exactly what the NFL wanted him to be. And then came August 12, 1978, when everything changed in a way nobody on that field could have predicted. If you're looking for the dividing line, this is it. It was a preseason game between the Oakland Raiders and New England Patriots. Except it didn't play out like preseason. It didn't feel like preseason. It felt like a warning, even if nobody wanted to say it out loud. And for one player, it would define everything that came after. The Patriots had just reached an agreement on a contract extension with their talented 26-year-old wide receiver Darryl Stingley. He was in the prime of his career, blazing speed, and a real threat. He had 110 receptions for 1,888 yards and 14 touchdowns in just 60 regular season games. He wasn't just having a good year, he was stepping into the next tier. He had done everything right. His future was already waiting for him. During the second quarter, both starting teams were still on the field when Stingley ran an inside slant toward the middle. Patriots quarterback Steve Grogan threw the ball, but it was high and overthrown, sailing over Stingley's head and out of reach. Stingley leaped anyway, arms outstretched, completely exposed, no way to protect himself. And Jack Tatum closed the distance and launched into him with a hit that wasn't helmet to helmet, but shoulder to helmet as Stingley lowered his head trying to brace. It wasn't a rare move for Tatum. It was muscle memory. It was the same hit he delivered his entire career. The impact compressed Stingley's spinal cord and fractured his fourth and fifth cervical vertebrae. When he hit the ground, he didn't move. He couldn't feel his fingers or his toes. For 10 agonizing minutes, both teams stood in silence as medical staffs worked on him, then strapped him to a stretcher and carried him off. The silence is what people remember because nobody had a script for it. At the hospital, doctors determined Stingley was paralyzed from the neck down, medically classified as incomplete quadriplegia or tetraplegia. His career was over. He would spend the next 29 years in a wheelchair before dying in 2007 from pneumonia complicated by his paralysis. He was 55. A few seconds in August, then decades of living with it. The hit lasted seconds. The consequences lasted decades. And for Tatum, no penalty, no disciplinary action. The hit was ruled legal under the 1978 rules, but the severity of the injury forced a reckoning. The incident became a national argument over whether football could ever separate its violence from its identity, and Jack Tatum never changed his style after it. That's the core of the controversy. Legal doesn't always mean acceptable. What happened next is what truly defines Jack Tatum's controversy. For nearly 30 years, Tatum and Stingley never met, never found a clean resolution. Tatum's refusal to apologize became the center of it. His stance was consistent. He was sorry Stingley was hurt, but he would never apologize for the way he played football. Two lives connected by one moment, but permanently separated by it. Stingley forgave him in his heart, but the two men stayed frozen in a cold peace. His family grew wary of Tatum's attempts to contact him, suspecting profit-motivated stunts rather than genuine overtures. In 2003, HBO invited both men to appear on the 25th anniversary of the incident, but Stingley refused after he learned the title of Tatum's third book. The assassin brand, while lucrative, left little room for a private, humane resolution. Even decades later, it was still raw enough to walk away from. According to his coach, John Madden, it was something that ate on him for his whole life. That's not a coach protecting a player, that's a coach admitting it lingered. But Tatum's impact went beyond personal controversy. The Stingley incident became a watershed moment that helped the NFL start legislating against extreme violence. The league tightened rules, and the concept of the defenseless receiver began to emerge. The league changed the rulebook. The footage stayed the same. Tatum finished his career with the Houston Oilers in 1980, recording a career-high 7 interceptions that year. He retired with 37 career interceptions for 736 yards, 10 fumble recoveries, and 1 Super Bowl championship. He was never voted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The final years of Jack Tatum's life were defined by a cruel irony. The man nicknamed the Assassin for breaking other bodies watched his own body fail him. Severe diabetes led to the amputation of all the toes on his left foot, then his left leg below the knee. He eventually lost his right leg to arterial blockage as well. For a guy who made a living taking away other people's movement, losing his own hit differently. When Darryl Stingley heard about Tatum's amputations in 2003, his response was a moment of grace that transcended decades of hostility. You can't, as a human being, feel happy about something like that happening to another human being. Maybe the natural reaction is to think he got what was coming to him, but I don't accept human nature as our real nature. Human nature teaches us to hate. God teaches us to love. Even after everything, compassion remained. Jack Tatum died of a heart attack on July 27, 2010, at the age of 61, while waiting for a kidney transplant caused by diabetes. His death came just 3 years after Darryl Stingley died in 2007 at the age of 55 from heart disease and pneumonia complicated by his quadriplegia. The Oakland Raiders released a statement calling Jack the standard bearer and an inspiration for the position of safety throughout college and professional football. Ronnie Lott said Tatum was one of his football heroes. Steve Grogan, Stingley's teammate, when asked about Tatum's death, said he had a hard time trying to find something nice to say. Even then, people didn't know what the right reaction was supposed to be. So, did Jack Tatum truly redefine controversy in the NFL? Or did the media, fans, and the league turn him into a symbol of something bigger? Jack Tatum was both an architect and a victim of his own controversy. But the media, the fans, and the NFL played their part in turning him into a symbol. Because the hit never disappeared, people just started talking about it differently. For years, the league used Tatum's hits to sell its silver and black renegade image. Media outlets used his highlights to define the glory of the sport by celebrating violent collisions. And when the cultural tide turned against violence, Tatum became the lightning rod for a league that needed to move toward a safer, more marketable image without admitting its own role in the brutality it once promoted. It's hard to deny it. The league loved the violence until it had to answer for it. While players like O.J. Simpson or Aaron Hernandez represent greater moral failings, their controversies sit outside the sport itself. Jack Tatum's controversy is argued over because it's about football, what it was, what it rewarded, and what it had to become. When you look at players like Vontaze Burfict or Bill Romanowski, they were penalized and suspended for breaking existing rules. But Tatum wasn't a rule breaker. He was a rule exploiter. His controversy comes from a simple fact. He was too good at a version of the game that the public eventually decided it couldn't stomach. That's what makes him hard to place. The game rewarded him, and then tried to pretend it never did. He played exactly as the game demanded, until the game demanded something different. And in the end, everything traces back to one moment. A clean hit. No flag. No whistle. Nothing illegal. Just consequence. And if that makes you uneasy, it should. Be sure to like and subscribe. Also, check out some of our other videos on the screen now, because this isn't just about Jack Tatum. It's about what the game was and what we decided we could live with. If you want more stories that sit right on that line, subscribe. There's another one waiting on your screen.